Hello, we have arrived to the letters to the Ephesians by the Apostle Paul. And the next verse is verse 9. But before I start reading verse 9, I just want to remind you that in verse 6, 7, and 8, Paul was talking to the slaves, the servants, should be a better translation. And as I mentioned, for example, the Hungarian translates it as servant rather than slave. So he's saying that they should love their masters. They should serve them wholeheartedly. They should serve them in a way that as if they were serving to God. And it in a sense, if you think about it, it shows your love, what kind of loving person you are. Because I remember reading a book, might have mentioned it, about it was called The Secret Agents of Christ in the Middle East, and it was about women who became Christians, and what they did was, even though they were abused by their husbands, the ones that the book mentioned, they showed love, they showed how Christ changed their lives, what loving people they became, and in turn it softened the hearts of the husband. And even though some of them were in abusive or unloving relationship, it completely transformed the husbands as well. And I know stories where people were telling me that they were working with others who were anti-Christian, and because of the way they carried themselves, because the love they showed towards them, then it changed their hearts. And although they didn't necessarily become Christian, but it just changed their mind, the way they see Christianity. But Paul says in verse 9 that the masters should do the same, because he says, "And master, treat your slaves in the same way. Do not threaten them, since you know that he who is both their master and yours is in heaven, and there is no favoritism with him." So Paul is saying that, yes, you masters, you bosses, you who have authority over others, you should treat them the same way that they are expected to treat you, because they are supposed to work for you wholeheartedly. Then you should treat them the same way. You should help them. You should see them as not as somebody who is beneath you, but somebody who does a job. And just because it doesn't seem to be less important, it might not necessarily be the case. Because I always say this at work: if the cleaning lady doesn't come in for 3 days, then we're just swimming in garbage and dirt. And so we do need cleaners. So thank God for cleaners. But you need everybody. Everybody's important, and you realize how important someone's job is when they're not there. That is why you have to respect them. The same way goes regarding the body, because you don't think that all the muscles are in your body as important, because you don't think about them as much. For example, you don't think about, if somebody's exercising or bodybuilding, they always think about the muscles that are showing most of the time, some of the time, right? But the moment you have an injury, you know how important that muscle for your existence, for your proper functioning as well. And again, if you're somebody who has authority over people, then this is what Paul says: treat them properly, treat them with love, treat them with this respect, because their master is the same as yours, and he doesn't care about your position or his position. It makes no difference to him. What he cares about is what is in your heart. Are you a loving person? Do you respect others? Do you treat others as if they were God? Jesus says in the book of the Gospel of Matthew, he says about it, he's talking about people who you visited in jail, who you helped out, who you fed. It's the same as if you had done to them. And if you treat them poorly is it is as if you had treated them poorly as well. So the most important thing is, if you're working for someone, do your job wholeheartedly. If someone is working for you, do not threaten them. As Paul says, treat them nicely, be nice to them. He's talking to Christians, although it's not to say that non-Christians you shouldn't treat well. It's just this Paul was talking to Christians. The only reason I'm mentioning is because you're a Christian, theoretically you shouldn't have any, or you shouldn't really have issues at work regarding your behavior if we all follow this. Obviously, if somebody's not a real Christian, quote unquote, or if somebody is not is a non-believer, there is a chance that they might not subscribe to this belief. And it's not to say, again, we have to mention that it's not to say that non-believers are somehow less behaving worse than a believer. All I'm saying is, if you're really a follower of Christ, if you really abide in Him as He abides in you, if you're really spending time with God and He's transforming you, then you really shouldn't have problems with your behavior. And that's what I said to a friend once. I said, wouldn't you imagine a world if everybody had the philosophy of love thy neighbor as you love yourself? How much better the world would be. Amen.